Welcome to Hockey Nights in Vegas, episode 37, brought to you by the Las Vegas Advisor. If it happens in Las Vegas, it happens at the Las Vegas Advisor. Visit www.lasvegasadvisor.com for all things Vegas. My name is Eddie Rivkin. I'm joined as always by my co-host, Joe Payne. And Joe, if you'll notice, I am wearing a golfing hat today. Why am I wearing a golfing hat today?
Because hockey season is over for you.
For the Vegas Golden Knights, the hockey season came to a crashing thud a couple of nights ago. Joe and I are going to specifically talk about what happened during the season. And then in episode 38, the finale of this year, we're going to talk to you about our predictions and who we think might still be here, who won't be here, and some fun, exciting other things like that. But since I'm wearing my golfing hat for episode 37, the Autopsy, Joe, it came all the way down to 2 days before the end of the season. The Golden Knights had their destiny in their own hands multiple times in the last 8 to 10 games of the season, and they laid an egg. So let's start with the obvious problem that was addressed in the 3 hours worth of press that we saw today at City National Arena: the injuries. Injuries happen in sports, right?
Nothing you can do. That's one of the things you can't control. There's a lot of things you can control in hockey. Injuries is not one that you can control. And unfortunately for the Vegas Golden Knights, they had a vast amount of injuries, starting at training camp. As McCrimmon told us, 2 players got hurt at their exhibition game in Salt Lake City against the LA Kings, and it was all downhill from there. You know, the peaks and valleys. They got some players back, and then they lost players. They got some players back, and they lost players again. They never really got good enough traction. When you say the season came to an end a couple of days ago, nah, I disagree. The season came to an end a lot longer than a couple of days ago. I mean, when you lose games to the New Jersey Devils, to the Philadelphia Flyers, when you lead the San Jose Sharks by 2 goals with 2 minutes and 30 seconds left to go in the game, and not only do you blow that game, but you also have a power play in overtime, and you can't capitalize it. And then that was one of the prevailing problems this year was the specialty teams.
Okay, let's talk about the injuries first, because the injuries, I think, were probably the overarching cause for a lot of the different things. 503 some man games. Kelly McCrimmon today made an interesting point, sort of dividing the injuries into 2 different categories after you asked him the questions. He talked about the broken bones, which are taking a slap shot to the foot or the wrist or whatever. And then he also talked about the wear and tear injuries, the hernias, the backs, you know, the things like that. But are you willing to say, though it wasn't certainly the only problem, would you be willing to say that the overarching problem that affected the outcome of the Golden Knights season was the injuries?
No, not it. It played into their failure, but there were a lot of things that went wrong with this team this year besides injuries. I mean, they have a lot of talent on this team, and the fact that they were in it, quote unquote, in it to the end, says a lot about the depth and talent of this team. The amount of injuries they had, a normal team with not as much depth as the Vegas Golden Knights would probably be out of it by the All-Star break. And that didn't happen here. Actually, this team pretty much they could have made the playoffs if they just won some crucial games down the stretch. They only missed by 3 points, Eddie. And they lost 3 points in those 3 shootout games where as Mark Stone says, when you go 0 for 17 in the shootouts, what are you going to do? And Logan Thompson played his ass off in the shootouts.
I agree with you 100%.
He stopped 12. He stopped 14 of the 17 shooters.
I think that I'm willing to, if you were making a bed, I'm going to say that the injuries were the prickly mattress at the bottom of the bed. And I think that, like you said, the other teams that had substantial losses in man games were Montreal and Arizona, and both of them were out of it by Christmas, basically.
Pretty much. 31st.
But some of the takeaways, and just so you folks know, Joe and I were at the Golden Knights Clean Out Locker Day media event. Today is the 3rd of May, where we got to talk to 9 Golden Knights players, Coach Pete DeBoer and General Manager Kelly McCrimmon. The recurring theme that a lot of the players brought up today was that the team lost a little bit of identity. And Kelly McCrimmon said that when they went into the season, that they were all excited for Carrier, Waugh, and KOLESAR to be on the 4th line, and they didn't see that until game 78, and it only lasted for 2 periods. But the identity of the team has always been play fast, play hard, forecheck relentlessly, right? And cause other teams great distress, force them into making bad decisions in a very short window of time. Tying the identity into the injuries, I don't blame any of the kids, not Ronberg, not any of those kids. They came up and they did the best that they could, but none of those kids are 4th line heavy players. And I think that the big difference in the Golden Knights team this year was they weren't a difficult team to play against. And what?
They were predictable.
They were predictable, but they also weren't a heavy, last year they were the tallest and the heaviest team in the NHL. This year, the only significant statistic is they were like the 3rd oldest team. And we'll talk about that, somewhere down the line. But they didn't have anybody this year that could really go out and lay the big hit on somebody that could change the tone of the game. Braden McNabb had a bunch of good hits. Keegan KOLESAR, I think, was surprisingly not as physical a force for a big guy, 6'2", 220, something like that. But when they changed the format of their team and they broke up the meat grinders line, all the intimidation factor of playing against the Golden Knights pretty much went out the window. They became much more of a finesse team, and they weren't really great at that.
They were being out hit in games 2 to 3 to 1.
Right.
And in previous years, it was just the opposite. Carrier and Reeves would have double-digit hits per game. And there were games where the Golden Knights going into the 3rd period had 7, 8 hits. You're not a tough team to play against if you don't take the body. You're not a difficult team to defend against if you don't put guys in front of the net. And was a major problem. When you say the team was the tallest and the biggest, but they never went to the front of the net for all intents and purposes. Most of their shots came from the perimeter. And at this level of hockey, you got the 62 starting goaltenders, 31 teams, 2 goaltenders. All these guys are good. All these guys are the cream of the crop. You can't expect to beat a goaltender from 60 feet away on a shot he can see. Now,
32 teams, 64 goaltenders.
Yeah, what I said 31 teams though.
Yeah.
Well, because I'm not counting the Vegas Golden Knights.
Because we didn't have a goaltender for a long time this year.
Wow.
But anyway, I digress.
That's another issue. You told me to not digress, and there you go.
Okay. So the identity is sort of unknown. We know what they wanted to be, but they weren't. We know that what they no longer are, and it doesn't seem like they're going to be able to come back from. They're not going to. I mean, what are they gonna do? They can't bring Reeves back. They can't do, stuff like that.
I asked McCrimmon that question in his presser. I asked him if he thought the Golden Knights had lost their identity as a physicality team, and he pretty much said no. Well,
I don't know how that could have been, but
yeah, I don't know.
I didn't. I think you elbowed me when that happened.
I did. I yelled you right in the ribs, like when he said, "No, I don't think we lost our identity." I'm like, "Really? Are you watching the same team I was watching?" Nobody was taking the body.
No, not ever.
Oh my God. It's just, I understand he's got a playbook to, I'm sure he sat upstairs obviously and watched the first half of the press conference because he made reference to a couple of things that were said when he
Right.
wasn't in the room. So he knew that a couple of players, and basically what I found interesting was Pat Chiaretti said something about friction between players, and DEBOER said friction between players and a coach. And that is probably something that was probably relatively new to this team. This, right from day one.
Why? Because they hadn't seen any adversity.
Well, that and winning helps solve a lot of problems.
Right. That's what Marchessault said.
Yeah.
When we're winning, the chemistry is great.
Right. Well,
or something to that effect.
And I will tell you this. I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I had been told by somebody who's pretty reliable that there was a friction between Pat Chiaretti and I'm not going to name the other player. And when Pat Chiaretti made reference to a friction between players, boy, that really immediately I said, wow, that person that told me this is spot on, because Pat Chiaretti would not say that unless he was part of the one end of the friction, so to speak. I was told what the friction is. I'm not going to reveal it. It was told to me in confidence. But the point is, when McCrimmon was asked about that by another one of our media guys about, is there friction in the team? He completely whitewashed that and blew it off like it was non-existent. And the reporter even said, it's not us that are making this up. It's the players that said there was some friction. And DEBOER even admitted there was some friction between a player and a coach. And again, the source that I have told me the friction was between Robin and DEBOER.
You know what? I don't think that friction is a huge deal. I mean, listen, they endured the hardest year of their 5 years as a franchise in existence. It's not going to, over the course of the year, like winning streaks and losing streaks, the whole thing is not going to be, kumbaya moments. I'm sure that we will completely agree about. Special teams were just absolutely abysmal. Is not even a big enough, fair enough, bad enough word. They were the number one penalty kill team in the NHL, and they went down to 21. They were 8th or 9th or 10th on the power play, and they went down to the 25th. And Pete DEBOER addressed it. He said that they changed voices and they did this, and he asked for a whole year to sort of sort it out and get it right. And, to a point, I agree with all of them. The last couple of games, you started to see what the power play could look like with Pacioretty on one half wall, Eichel on the other half wall, Stone in the bumper, and Theodore on the point, and whoever the fifth was. But I mean, 80, that's 8. We're talking about 80 games in. It's a copycat league, but if you copy sticking your nose in a pile of shit, your nose is going to smell. And there's just, to me, if I could identify one thing aside from laying the foundation of the injuries, the special teams cost them at least a dozen points.
Yeah, the special teams cost them the playoffs.
Right. I mean, there were other mitigating factors that we will also say cost them the playoffs, but that was absolutely 100% identifiable as one of the reasons that they didn't make the playoffs.
I think it's the number one, injuries aside, because, you have the next man up mentality, but you cannot just say, well, we didn't make the playoffs because we had a lot of injuries. No, you can't say that. You didn't make the playoffs because your power play sucked. You didn't make the playoffs because your penalty kills sucked. That's the reason they didn't make the playoffs. You didn't make the playoffs because you didn't win the games that you had to win against teams you should have beat with one eye closed and the other hand, and one hand tied behind your back. You shouldn't have lost 2 times to the Chicago Black Sox. You shouldn't have lost 2 times to the Philadelphia Flyers. You shouldn't have lost to the San Jose Sharks a team that you only beaten you once in its entire career, and you have a 2-goal lead with 2.5 minutes to go in a game that you absolutely have to win, and you blow that lead. That's why they lost it. They didn't lose it because of injuries, because like you and I both said, the last couple of games, they had pretty much as a complete roster as they were going to get based upon the salary cap structure. You had Stone and you had Eichel and Pacioretty all playing together. Not together, but I mean all playing at the same time when that didn't happen. So I'm not buying that the injuries was the only reason. Did the injuries play a part in it? Absolutely. But the performance level, the specialty team performance level, both on the penalty kill and the power play, was the demise of the Vegas Golden Knights this season. And no one can change my mind on that.
Speaking of injuries, we should just sort of chop this little segment into it, because we actually did get some information, firm information. Robin Lehner is having surgery tomorrow on his shoulder, though they didn't say which one. Laurent Brossoit is having a procedure day after tomorrow. And when Kelly McCrimmon was talking about wear and tear injuries in back, he put Laurent Brossoit in that category, but he didn't say specifically what the procedure is. He also said Riley Smith will not be having surgery. And he gave us some updates on some of the other players. He said they would probably be ready for the playoffs if they would have made it further down the line, that being Nick Hague and Brett Howden. But
he also made reference to the fact that Stone is not completely out of the woods, that he's going to be seeking a possibility of some additional procedures, and as Stone stated himself, he's just not going to rely on one guy. He's going to inquire 5 or 6 different medical opinions on what he should do. So not only
medical opinions, he said he was going to talk to other players who have the similar sort of thing. So now we can, I think, surmise that what he has is now a known entity. Now, they didn't tell us what it is, but if he feels like he can go to talk to other players in the NHL who have had the similar, as he said, some of them had the same thing and played till, 37 or 38, and others, he said, they were on their couch by 30. Right. So that's
troublesome. That's troublesome.
That's a hugely troublesome thing for Mark Stone. And listen, as somebody who's lived most of their adult life with a bad back, I understand why he's going to consult as many people as he can and see if he can get a few people to say the same thing and maybe give him a little bit of direction. And you and I will both agree he played the last 7 or 8 games, but he was
not a full capacity.
I would say not at 50% capacity.
And how about, what did you think of his appearance today? He looked
frail.
He looked frail, like almost like he was sick.
He moved very gingerly when he walked in. He stood very still behind the podium.
Right.
And he looked, he didn't look like he was in pain, but he looked like he was a man who was protecting himself from showing pain. And that will make sense. The people who have a bad back, that'll make sense, because you don't want to look like.
Yeah, you find a position that you're comfortable in.
And you ride it.
Feeling pain, and you try not to move out of that position.
I mean, he walked up, he kind of found his groove, and then he put his hands down, and he didn't move much off the mark for we got him for what, about 10 minutes-ish, something like that. I was more worried watching the 7 or 8 steps from the doorway to the podium, because he did not look like an NHL player. That's for sure.
And that's got to be troublesome, not only for the organization, but for the fan base, because Stone is a born leader, and he's the leader of this team. And
he's the heart and soul.
Right. And I believe it was Martinez made a point that that 5-game road trip where they lost all 5 games. Yeah. He attributed that to the lack of leadership in the room, that they just could not find themselves. And obviously Stone was missing that. So Stone plays a really big part on this team. And if he's not able to go come October, I'm not sure what's going to happen with this team.
And Kelly McCrimmon made that point, because Kelly, just so you guys out there understand. Pete DeBoer went first, 9 players, and then Kelly McCrimmon. And Kelly McCrimmon referenced the fact that Stone and Pacioretty and Martinez weren't in the room for extended period of times. And they made note of that 5-game road trip, specifically where the leadership wasn't available because they don't take LTIR players on the road. They just don't. They leave them at home and they get treatment and things like that. So this is maybe the most important point in the offseason is going to be Mark Stone's health. I think going into next year, and we're not going to talk about it now. We're going to talk about it when we go into what are the Vegas Knights going to do in the next 4 months in episode 38. But to set that up, Mark Stone's health may be the singular most important thing that the Golden Knights have to sort out between now and camp in September. Agree?
They might not have a salary cap issue because if Stone isn't able to go, they don't have
8.5, right?
8.5.
8.5.
Yeah.
Another thing that was talked about at great length today and was brought up a number of times by our friend Jesse Granger of The Athletic was the 1-1-3 system that they installed for this year. 1 forechecker, 1 guy back, and 3 guys basically standing at the red line. And to a man,
similar to the trap system that New Jersey used, correct?
Yeah, in that vicinity of things, I think. To that end, and to a man, they all said that, the system turns over a lot of pucks in the neutral zone and all of the positive things that it did. I want you to go first because I have a really thick opinion about the 1-1-3. Do you think that the 1-1-3 is the right system for the Golden Knights when they're healthy?
No, the Golden Knights in their first year, and I'll reference back to the first year, they lived on turnovers, on forecheck, and on stretch passes. The 1-1-3 does not allow for that. The 1-1-3 creates not a real strong forecheck. It doesn't create an opportunity for stretch passes. So I think you have to develop. Now, I understand DeBoer has got a system, but you need to develop a system that molds well with the kind of talent you have on the team. If you have tenacious players like a Carrier, then again, Reeves, the fourth line, the meat grinder line, that line created opportunities for the next line coming out because they hemmed the puck in deep into their offensive zone with turnovers. And then when you rolled out the first line right after the fourth line, they didn't have to cover 200 feet of ice. They only had to cover 100 feet of ice because the puck was on their side of the red line, so to speak, the positive side of the red line. So, DeBoer has this 1-3-1, which he changed like about halfway through the season. If I'm correct on that, I guess he was trying to make an adjustment. He should have made an adjustment on the power play or had somebody make an adjustment on the power play. But he went with the 1-1-3, which I think is not conducive to skaters that he has on the team. He's got a guy like Stephenson and Waugh and Carrier that are really good skaters, strong skaters. But the 1-1-3 doesn't allow for them to utilize their skills, in my opinion. So I don't think the 1-1-3 works, but maybe you have a different opinion.
No, actually, you took a whole lot of the points that I wanted to make. I don't think it's a fit at all. I think that if we go back to that identity point that we talked about just a few minutes ago, the 1-1-3 is not an intense forechecking system. It's designed to turn over pucks in the neutral zone for quick strikes the other way. But the problem with that, and you and I talked about it a number of times, while we were at the games, is that a lot of times the defensemen are left flat-footed at center ice. And when the puck gets dumped behind them into their defensive corner, they're already a step behind. And if by chance they are first to the puck in the corner, their defensemen were getting creamed. I mean, Zach Whitecloud got his ass, he got smashed through the fucking boards a whole bunch of times. And we kept saying to each other, this kid has taken way too many massive hits. And I will put forth that is specifically because of that system where they're flat-footed with the other team coming out. And if they don't block a pass or slow the flow or close the gaps through the neutral zone and the puck gets dumped behind them into the corner, that's a recipe for.
And right. And even McNabb made reference to the fact that he was eating a lot of plexiglass also.
And he's a big guy.
I know.
You know, he's a big guy. And I think that, you know, for the long-term durability, I just don't think I don't think the system was nearly as effective as the party line that we got today. I don't think that their breakouts from the zone improved so significantly that this is the answer. I believe as a whole that I understand why they wanted to play the system. I understand the system and everything like that. But as you so correctly stated earlier on, the system has to fit the players that you have. And even Marchessault said, you know, sometimes I like to not listen to the coach and go on my own, right? The system was so rigid that it took away the creativity and it took away a lot of the speed and it took away a lot of, I think, what made the Vegas Golden Knights the Vegas Golden Knights. And it didn't reap nearly the rewards that that they thought it would.
You know who I think suffered the most from this new system was William Karlsson. Because William Karlsson, I mean, he is a good two-way player.
He's a great two-way player.
His defensive side is real good. His offensive side was limited because of the 1-1-3. And this leads me to my question to you, Eddie. Did DEBOER go to the 1-1-3 because he wasn't confident in his goaltenders? Because the 1-1-3 adds a different layer defensively. Maybe he's not comfortable with Brossoit and LEHNER, and obviously Logan Thompson came into the picture later on. Maybe he entered the season not really confident in who he had in net, and that's why he made the adjustment to the 1-1-3. I mean, think about it. It's a defensive move.
I think that he might have leaned on that system more as the injuries piled up and they were less and less likely to be effective as a freewheeling team. And they didn't have the ability to be a bump and grind and chip and chase heavy team. I think that could easily be a safety valve kind of. I mean, listen, there was the left wing lock, right? There was the neutral zone trap, and there was 4 or 5 of the things that made hockey very difficult to watch.
Boring
for many, boring for many years.
But you know, when you say that he did that because he
I mean,
and you said that affected the scoring. If you go back to playoffs here, to the playoff series against Dallas and the playoff series against Montreal, they stopped scoring and they weren't playing the 1-1-3 then. The Vegas Golden Knights just stopped scoring. And if you don't score goals, your goaltender's got to throw a shutout or maybe give up 1 goal in order for you to be competitive. And that wasn't happening. It wasn't happening with Fleury. It wasn't happening with Robin Lehner. So it just wasn't not happening, period. So I'm not sure.
Well, that brings us to the last point. And the last word that was used fairly frequently in today's pressures, pressure. This was a different kind of pressure for the Golden Knights. They've never had any regular season pressure whatsoever. The only time that they've had pressure was in the playoffs. They go down to Colorado and things like that. And there was the beginning of this drought that you speak of, where they squeezed their sticks a little bit hard, or, you know, I mean, they lost to inferior teams. They were a better team than Dallas 2 years ago. and they were a better team than Montreal last year. We're not going to even argue. I mean, if you want to disagree and you want to write us a comment down below and state your case why you think either of those teams were better than the Golden Knight, feel free, but, be prepared to get bombed by Joe and I. But the point that you make is, maybe this team just, they didn't handle the pressure well. I mean, 0 for 17 in the shootouts, losing to New Jersey, losing to Chicago, losing, all of those things when destiny was really in their hand. There was 3 times in the last 6 games, if they win a game, they can win out and force the hand of the other team. And it didn't come through. And Kelly McCrimmon, the competitor, Kelly McCrimmon said, I'm absolutely disappointed that we didn't make the playoffs. And I mean, aside from the fact that you owe me $25, I just, this whole season, it doesn't add up. I mean, it adds up to bad, but this is a real concern. If they're grabbing their sticks and they can't, Pete DeBoer's always said first to 3, right? They're having trouble getting to 2, and I don't know, is it in their heads or, are they in their own heads? William Karlsson was incredibly eloquent today when he was talking about going back to Sweden and recharging and going and potentially talking to somebody to vent, because he was disappointed in his personal performance as well as the result of the team. Is this like the yips in golf on the putting green? When they get into a tight game, when there's really something to play for, is this something team-wide?
Well, when you referencing Karlsson is not going to excel in a 1-3-1 system. I'm sorry, 1-1-3 system. He's just not going to excel. He's good defensively. He's always been good defensively. But if you want to get the most out of Karlsson and get the most out of him in a 2-way kind of game, you need to free him up and give him some flexibility.
Yes.
And having him sit back in a neutral zone is not Karlsson's forte. It's not helping his game. He doesn't need any help defensively. And he even said that he's hungry now. If anything, a lot of players say, based upon what happened this year, and I know we really don't want to get into now what's going to go on next year, but their players are hungry. And Max Pacioretty made two references to pressure. First, he said playing in Las Vegas is no pressure at all. But he said pressure is a privilege, which I thought was kind of poetic, because you want to, if you're a big time player, you want to have pressure on you.
Sure.
And he's right. It's a privilege to be able to have that pressure, to have that expectation that people expect you to perform at. So coming into today, I thought DeBoer's job was safe. I thought he would survive because of, as McCrimmon says, the hand he was dealt. But after listening to Pete, when he said, well, I have 1 year left of my contract, we'll see what happens. And McCrimmon did not offer any, sometimes the general manager, owner of the team comes out and he makes a statement that I have confidence in my coach and he's my coach. But McCrimmon just said, well, we have meetings coming up. We'll see what happens. Wow. And then all of a sudden I'm saying to myself, maybe DeBoer is not safe. Maybe there is a rumbling of there needs to be change. And not that it's DeBoer's fault, but maybe the players on their exit meetings need a new voice, need a new system. They don't want to play the 1-1-3. I don't know. Like I said, we're not privy to those in behind the scenes meetings, but maybe there is something to be said about that. I don't know. Well, I guess we'll find out. McCrimmon said he has a meeting with DeBoer next week.
This week?
Yeah, this week. So I guess we'll find out.
So we'll leave that as the cliffhanger, and we'll use that as the opening into episode 38, which will also be presented to you from us by the Las Vegas Advisor. If it happens in Las Vegas, it happens at the Las Vegas Advisor. Visit www.lasvegasadvisor.com basically for everything that there is Las Vegas.
Because if there's anything you need to know in Las Vegas, Anthony Curtis is the guy to ask.
So we're going to end episode 37 with some report cards and awards. They won't all be good, but there seems to be this thing amongst the people on social media where they feel like they need to give each player a grade and try to explain why they've done that. But I'm not going to pick on the fan base anymore because you told me I can't. But let's talk about awards. Who's the most valuable player on the Golden Knights this year?
It's a tie between Stephenson and Marchessault.
Great.
I think
no further discussion. Chandler Stephenson had a career year. Marchie got back to 30. They were the heart and the soul of the team and played the most games.
You agree with me on that one?
Agreed 100%.
1A, 1B, or 1B, 1A.
I just call it a tie. Call it a tie and give them both a case of nothing for winning. Who was the rookie of the year?
Wow. Rookie of the year. They played so many players and so many young guys. I mean, I think they had at least 9 players play their first NHL game this year, correct?
Some absurd number like that.
The rookie of the year. You know whose play I did like? I liked Lecision's play. I thought he was good. But no one really jumps out at me as a rookie of the year. Most improved player?
Wait, no.
Okay,
you missed it.
Okay.
It's Logan Thompson.
Okay.
They threw the kid into the deep fryer, and the kid had one shaky game and was solid. He was solid giving up 4 goals against Washington.
I misunderstood your question. I thought we were talking about skaters, so to speak.
Anybody that donned a jersey.
Logan Thompson is obviously the clear choice. I thought we were going to talk about goaltenders in a different category, but
okay.
But I defer to you, Logan Thompson. Even though he didn't play that many games, 25, I think,
something like that.
Yeah. He obviously was the surprise rookie of the year.
Who was the biggest surprise among the rest of the team? Who was the biggest positive surprise? And then I guess we'll do the negative surprise too.
Well, I already said Marchessault and Stephenson. They were good, and I think they were surprisingly well. I thought considering what was going on. You want me to give you someone other than those two?
Yeah, I want you to give me a player that maybe they picked up in free agency, or somebody that had a lot better year than you anticipated, something like that.
Nicholas Waugh. I'm going to go with Nicholas Waugh. He was good. He was good, especially in the shitouts. He was good, even though the last 2 he didn't. The old motorcycle kick didn't work anymore. But he was a pleasant surprise, and he's due for a new contract too, which is going to be hard for the Vegas Golden Knights to find.
So would you say he's the most improved player this year for them?
Yes,
I agree with that. I will give honorable mention. I thought Ben Hutton was a really, really, really savvy free agent pickup for not a lot of money. You know, he came in at the time when the D core was basically decimated, and I thought he was really, really steady and really, really dependable. And at the price that they got him for, I thought he was a very, very pleasant surprise. Who's the biggest disappointment this year?
KOLESAR.
I think to be the biggest disappointment, you have to have higher expectations than what we thought KOLESAR probably had. We were both so
you don't think you didn't look at him preseason as the guy who was gonna sort of pick up the band where Reeves left off. He wasn't the guy. Yeah,
of course
he didn't do that. He didn't do that. I mean, Reeves was never really an offensive threat,
Right.
but KOLESAR, I mean, he almost like he couldn't put the puck into an open net. I mean, he wound up getting a couple of goals later in the season, but
Freebies, yeah.
he was just snake bitten all year. No matter what he did with the puck, it just went in the wrong direction. So to me, he's the biggest disappointment in all aspects, offensively, tenacity wise, physicality wise. I didn't think he brought anything to the table that it would make me go, wow. So he's my biggest disappointment.
I hate to say this, but the continued regression of William Karlsson, to me, is just a massive, whether it's systemic, whether he's lost confidence. 12 goals at $5.9 million for the next 5 or 6 years. I mean, the size of that potential albatross. And listen, I'm rooting for the guy. Whatever he needs to do to go to Sweden, to get his head straight, or whatever's in his wheelhouse to get himself right. Will he ever be a 40-goal scorer again? No, he will not.
I don't know. Eddie. Not with the 1-1-3 system. He'll never be a 40-goal scorer. If DEBOER or whoever the next coach is, if there's a new coach, if they change the system, I think William Karlsson will flourish.
I hope that William Karlsson will flourish. He's an original misfit. He's basically played on the same line for 5 years. He deserves every single opportunity to get his game back. But, he said he didn't finish well this year and he didn't execute. And he was very, very open and direct in his self-analysis. So I'm rooting for the guy. He's good for the city. He's good for the club. Having the original Misfits line together, potentially, and we'll get into that into episode 38. Those are all really positive things. But he really has struggled on the offensive side of the puck. And with a team that is absolutely stuck to the salary cap, and is going to be stuck to the salary cap for the foreseeable future, they need more out of Mr. Karlsson, in my opinion.
I think you're being a little bit unfair when you say he hasn't brought it all offensively. The whole team hasn't brought it all offensively. So,
but the whole team's not making $5.9 million for 6 years.
Some guys are making 10. Some guys are making 8.5. Some guys are making 8. Well, when you look at those contracts, Karlsson's a bargain. And I think you're being unfair to him. I think he's forced to play in a system that is not conducive to his style of play. Marchie is more of a grinder and can create things, and that's why he got to his career high 30, because he's not afraid to go in the corners.
That's why he's the front.
Not that I'm saying Karlsson's afraid to go in the corners, but that's just not his style of play.
And Marchessault is the front. He's the front one of the one.
Marchessault is not afraid to get his nose dirty.
Right.
I'll end it on that.
The autopsy is complete. The Golden Knights are getting medical treatment and making tea times. Joe and I are not done yet. We have one more episode where we're going to put on our Swami hats and guest lineups and coaching and all that other fun stuff. Our thanks to the Las Vegas Advisor, www.lasvegasadvisor.com. If it happens in Vegas, it happens at the Las Vegas Advisor. This will wrap up episode 37.